Hi there, and welcome to Discover Bucks Museum in Aylesbury. I'm Will, and I'm standing here in our new Embroiderers Guild exhibition called Blooming Threads, 400 Years of Embroidered Flowers from Around the World. What I'd like to do today is share with you my 5 favourite pieces on display in the exhibition, hopefully to whet your appetite enough to come along in person and see the exhibition. But if you're not able to do that, then hopefully this short film will at least give you a flavour of what's on display. Now, the exhibition was inspired by this book called Embroidered Treasures, Flowers, written by Annette Collinge. And the book is based on the collection of the Embroiderers Guild. So what we've tried to do in this exhibition is fit as many of the pieces illustrated in the book into the exhibition as possible. And we've supplemented it with extra pieces from the collection so that there's a lot to see. There's a whole range of embroidery techniques on display here. There's contemporary embroidery, historical embroidery. There are pieces stitched with unusual materials, things like fish scales and straw and plastic net bags. So, to use that well-worn phrase, there's something for everyone. So the first piece that I'd like to show you today, it's an embroidered panel that was probably made as a wall hanging. It was made in the late 18th century on the Greek island of Samos in the Aegean Sea. And it's this piece on the wall over here. And you can see it's this beautiful symmetrical design of carnations and tulips, all stitched in these colourful silk threads on a fine linen base. And what I really love about this is that it can't hide where it's from. It just oozes sun-drenched Mediterranean vibes. Look at the colours, the ochres, the reds, yellows, oranges, browns, all stitched in these wonderful silk threads that seem to shimmer like sunlight on water. So when I look at this, I like to imagine myself standing on a beach looking out at the Mediterranean Sea. In terms of the motifs here, the carnations and the tulips, they were often found on Turkish Iznik tiles of the 16th and 17th centuries. So there's clearly a Turkish influence going on here, which makes perfect sense when you consider how close Samos is to mainland Turkey. And I described this piece just now as symmetrical, but actually that's something else I like about it, because when you look up close, you do see subtle differences. So it's not actually symmetrical. And what that does for me is it adds visual interest. So every time I look at this, I see something different. Okay, so the next piece that I'd like to show you is from North America, from Canada to be precise, and it was made by the Métis, that's M-E-T-I-S, the Métis, who are an indigenous people of Canada whose ancestry is a mixture of European and native roots. Now, the Métis were renowned, or are renowned, for their colourful embroidery and beadwork. So the piece that I'd like to show you today is an example of Métis embroidery on leather, and it's in this case here. Just open it up. So it's this beautiful design of sort of stylized flowers on leather, probably deer or moose skin. And this type of embroidery is often found on clothing and on other personal and domestic items, so often found in a functional context. And that's what I particularly like about this style of embroidery, is the stitch work uses a technique that is both functional and decorative. And what I mean by that is that the first and last stitch of each thread would go fully through the base fabric, through the leather, but all the subsequent stitches would just catching the surface of the leather and not going fully through. So what that means is that there are far fewer holes going right through the fabric. And what that then means is that if you are wearing this on clothing, for example, then it made the item of clothing more flexible to wear, but also, and crucially, more waterproof because there are fewer holes. Okay, so the next piece that I'd like to show you is a contemporary work, and it was made by a real giant in the world of embroidery and textile arts, Audrey Walker, who sadly passed away in 2020 at the age of 92. But Audrey enjoyed a long and distinguished career in textile arts and was always pushing the boundaries of what embroidery could do. So the piece that I'd like to show you today is this piece on the wall here. It's called White Tulips, and it was made by Audrey fairly late in her career in 2010. And on the face of it, it looks like a fairly traditional work. It's a still life of flowers in a vase. It's been stitched in quite muted colours, so it's very calming to look at. But what I like about it is that if you get up close, you can see that the machine and hand embroidery that Audrey has undertaken creates this dense, busy crisscrossing of thread that is just fizzing with energy. So it works on two levels. You can enjoy this work from a distance, or you can get up close and look at the complexity of the stitch work. I also like that Audrey is quite playful with this piece. So she's giving us two works of art in one, if you like. You've got the still life in coloured threads at the top, but then look at the bottom. We've got looks like a black and white artist's sketch of the flowers. And you can see it's overhanging the border of the base panel at the bottom there. So Audrey is refusing to be constrained by a traditional rectangular panel. It's sort of like Audrey is putting us in, or giving us the eyes of the artist when we're looking at this piece. And this artistic approach that she's taking makes sense when you consider that she came from a fine art background. Audrey studied painting at the Slade School of Art in the 1940s before having an epiphany in the 50s about the possibilities of stitch. And so she became a member of the pioneering textile arts group in the 1960s, the 62 group. And in the 1970s and 80s, she went on to head up the world-renowned Department of Embroidery and Textiles at Goldsmiths. So it was a very distinguished career. And Audrey's work can be found in public and private collections across the world. The Embroiderers Guild has several examples, as does the V&A. Okay, so the next piece that I'd like to show you is another item of historical embroidery. With the Greek panel, we visited Europe. With the Métis embroidery on leather, we visited North America. So how about now we visit Asia? And I'd like to show you a typical style of Indian embroidery that is found actually across Asia, but it's believed that it began in India in the 17th century as a way for the lower classes to mimic the heavily jewelled and sparkly garments of the wealthy. And it's a style of embroidery called shisha, or mirror work. And you can see it on this panel from a blouse in the case here. So it's this floral design, although it's not immediately obvious because it's very stylized to the point of abstraction. But you can see in the center of all the flowers are mirrors, as well as mirrors being used for the petals there. So the whole surface is covered with mirrors. And that's what I really like about it, because whenever I see shisha work in the collection, I always like to imagine what this would have looked like when being worn. You could imagine someone going about their daily business on a bright day and the sunlight just glistening in all these mirrors. It would have just looked fantastic. And I also like the technique that's been used here, because These mirrors have not been glued to the surface, and they haven't got holes in them that is holding them with thread. It's actually the stitchwork that is creating a kind of pocket for the mirror that is holding them in place. So it's a very clever technique that, again, is an example, I think, of the marrying of function and decoration. Okay, so the final piece that I'd like to show you is my favourite piece. So I have saved the best till last. Now, by best, I don't mean it's the most professional piece of embroidery in the exhibition, because it's not. It's perhaps more rustic than refined, but it's the emotional response I have to it. It's just that gut feeling. It is an utterly charming depiction of wild flowers, and it's in the case here. It was made in 1923 by Nancy Stansfield when she was a student at Cheltenham Ladies College. And immediately what drew me to this piece was her use of colour. It's stitched in wool threads on a linen base. And the colours, I've always had a soft spot for primary colours. So I just love Nancy's bold and confident use of red, yellow and blue here. It really drew me in. But perhaps more than that, it was the composition I just find fascinating, because I think we get used to embroidery that works on symmetry and repetition, because I think perhaps as humans we look for that. We look for order in chaos. And when you're looking at symmetrical designs, there's a harmony, there's a balance there. What Nancy is doing here is quite the opposite. She has embraced chaos. There's no symmetry or repetition here. It's seemingly random. You can almost imagine the breeze blowing through this field of wild flowers, blowing them this way and that. There's a lot of movement here, and I just really love that. And I think actually to achieve that effect is more difficult than one might imagine, because if you're working to a symmetrical or repetitive design, at least you know the rules you're working to. But when you are just choosing a random composition like this, then all the creative decisions are on your shoulders, and Nancy has had to create a pleasing visual effect out of chaos, and I think she's done an absolutely splendid job. Okay, so that's all the pieces that I'd like to show you today. I hope you've enjoyed seeing them up close, and if you're able to come to the museum to see the exhibition in person, then you will receive a very warm welcome. The exhibition is up throughout 2023, so there's plenty of time. But for now, I think that's all from me. So thank you very much for listening. Cheerio.